Good morning, everyone. My name is Adrian, and I'm a founder and director at the North-South Initiative. A few days ago, my Instagram got replicated by a scammer, so rest assured I'm the real Adrian. Okay? So I've been given this task to share a bit on some of the difficult aspects of governance when it comes to labour migration. Don't worry, I do have a PowerPoint, so you can feel free to look anywhere. Yeah. Firstly, we start with Malaysia's track record in managing forced labour. Yeah. So if you look at the US TIP report, we have been on tier 3 for 2 years in a row. And there are few GLCs also and private companies in the under the veto release order by the CBP. Yeah? It's one of the agencies in US that looks at sanctions, something like sanctions of companies with forced labor. So our record is quite bad, and over the past 30 years, labour migration has been used by the state and the private sector as an advantage. And unfortunately, that advantage has caused Malaysian workers' labour standards to be very low. When it comes to corruption, of course, we cannot just look at rasuah. We have to look at the systemic abuses that have caused not just the abuse from the government side, but also the private sector. And the migrant workers are seen, looked at as ATM machines, not just at an individual level, but for the government. And I was trying to calculate some of the mathematics of how big is the amount of money involved in the corruption related to migration. I think easily every year it would involve at least 100 billion. And this is how I kind of came up with the figure. So if you look at the migrant workers' labour cycle from the recruitment back in the country of origin, to the placement, to the transportation, to the life here, remittance, levies, tax, to exiting the country. If you speak to migrant workers, they will say at least every year they will have to fork out 10,000 ringgit. Of course, at the recruitment stage, Bangladeshi workers pay 20,000. Yeah? And then I recently found out from employers that to hire one migrant worker, they fork out between 15 to 20,000. And if it's for domestic worker, it can go up to 30,000. Now, no way of will the official figures of fees reach more than 5,000. It doesn't happen. So where is this huge amount of money going through? And if you calculate the maths, say 3 million migrant workers and the employers who hire them, you can easily reach that 100 billion. So the figures are big. And that's why that made me realize why the Home Affairs Ministry wants to control the recruitment processes of migrant workers. And I think this was one of the fatal mistakes that Anwar made. After many years of lobbying for the management to be under the Ministry of Human Resource, just a few weeks after coming into office, Anwar Ibrahim's administration flip-flopped and it went back to KDN. It's very suspicious. And then after looking at the maths, it made sense. Levies alone are in the billions, the recalibration fees are in the billions. So why would a ministry want to let go of all that cash? Yeah. So that's a brief introduction of how complex it can be. The second complexity is, of course, we cannot blame migrant workers for being here. And we need to be careful with that because there are groups that use that kind of language in the defense of Malaysian workers' rights. So there's two competing rights here. Number one is the Malaysian workers' priority to get jobs. Okay, that is fair. Any job vacancy should go to a Malaysian first. Okay, that's number one. Whether it's quality job, whether it's decent work, unfortunately, I don't think people or any of us, civil society, the trade unions are analysing that. We are still at the low bar, minimum wage. That's the best we can talk about. And then the second competing right is the migrant workers or migrants' right to mobility. You can't stop it. We tried during the pandemic, but it didn't work. And I'm telling you, if a migrant worker wants to come, he will find any way. And that, of course, unfortunately includes paying people at the border. Yeah. So these are the two competing rights. Unfortunately, the impact, as we can all see, is wages are low. And I have another theory that says the reason why employers will continue to prefer migrants over Malaysian workers any day. Malaysian workers, you can stand on your nose also, an employer will still prefer a migrant. And this is my theory. A migrant worker is, through forced labor, is made to work or produce an output equivalent to 3 to 5 Malaysian workers. Okay? I can justify that. So a migrant worker will work 12 to 16 hours. And when we scold them, don't work overtime, you will kill yourself. They say, no, that's our income, we want to earn. They work on Sundays, they work on holidays, they work on public holidays. So 365 days. So in an economic sense, and I know morally it's wrong, but technically how do you stop that? How do you tell employers, hey, you can't do that? So for example, the overtime maximum for Malaysia, Malaysian workers is 104 hours. But migrants are willing and they will fight to work for up to 200 hours overtime. Yeah, it's illegal, but through special permits, special approvals, you can increase your productivity overtime by that. Yeah. So this, with that mentioned, it's a very complex issue. There's two kinds of corruptions. One is the basic, the petty ones. Enforcement officers will walk in the street during a raid and extort money from the migrants. So if you are undocumented, then either they pay 3,000 ringgit to Lepas, or it can be as low as buying a Red Bull or a packet of cigarettes or even kopi. So it's literally kopi money. Yeah, you pay to escape. So and then you have a bit more complex systemic type of corruption, which it's very complicated. And one document that I think everyone here must study, which shows a bit of the details of systemic abuse. This is the Parliamentary Accounts Committee report, November 2020. And it lists down all these strange happenings. I mean, not strange to us, but it's not really rasuah corruption, but it's gross abuse. So, for example, I think they found that the immigration management system was hacked a few times, or maybe the password was used by other people to create fake quotas. And the strangest thing was, and this is where you have to, the local unions have to fight. The special approval for quotas was actually higher than the number of actual quotas allocated. So it's so ridiculous. You have huge allocations, abnormal allocations of quotas for foreign workers when Malaysians are struggling to get jobs. And actually, me and Aziz, my friend, we went to one of these anti-corruption agencies, and I think one of the officers actually blurted out and said, "Tak apa, janji ada surat Menteri Tasara kan?" And I was shocked. I said, how dare you say that? Aziz, I think you remember. So I think our moral compass is broke, and we think certain things like this is either okay, yeah, it's a migrant worker, in the social structure of society, they're at the bottom of the chain. And also in that report, it showed that there are mediators involved. There's some politicians name mentioned. And like I mentioned, special approvals by the minister. And it also listed something that is a health concern. So migrants who fail the FOMEMA medical test, they could somehow appeal and get back into the labour force. I am not supporting that 8 or 9 list on the FOMEMA checklist. I think it's very racist and even sexist because they consider pregnancy and a disease. But what happened was those who were deemed unfit didn't exit the country. So, another layer of corruption could have happened for them to not be deported. And with the second report that is still under the Official Secrets Act, which we need to study, is the report by the Independent Committee on Migrant Workers Management. So till today, we are still guessing. What was so secretive that for the sake of labor in the country you don't want to expose. I have my own theories, but I don't know. I think it's exposing some higher than politicians' names that people think it's too sensitive, because this is a group of people who you may not be able to charge in court. The other conflict of interest we find is in the supply chains. So if you look at the supply chains that are already in trouble, during the pandemic we saw the glove industry, we saw palm oil industry getting into trouble with CBP, and some of these companies, of course the GLCs heavily invest in them, but when they do audits, okay, so there's another industry called audit industry. It's not the financial audit. It's to help, it's like a report card for supply chains to see whether they are clean or not. And these reports are then sent back to the buyers, to the brands, to say, hey, your company is clean. But what we found, and there's a report by Transparentum on this, that there is audit fraud. Meaning the auditors, in order to stay competitive in terms of that business sector of audit, they kind of not give the full report. So by the time we realize or somebody exposes gross abusers in a supply chain, it's too late. The buyers may have to return the product, or they will have to cancel hundreds of millions in business deals because your product was made using forced labor. And it's not just the Americans who are talking about it, the British are going to talk about it, EU, Australia, Canada. But why is Malaysia not talking about it? So Malaysia shouldn't wait for all this international pressure, don't wait for the tip report, blah, blah, blah. We should be clear. Labor is important, we must protect it. The problem is migrant workers and local workers don't have the same standards of protections. Even the law is not the same. Yeah, we included SOCSO, but it's not the same protection. Migrants, you don't need to pay EPF, and that's why I said, Malaysian workers, you can stand on your nose. Any day, employers will prefer migrant work, and this is a struggle. By right, the unions were supposed to be formed and defend everyone's right, but that didn't happen. So in one of the companies that was owned by PNB, we took up a case, and the unions actually didn't want the migrants to join the union. So it was very peculiar. I mean, if I was a union member, if I was a union leader, I would want more union members to join. I get more fees, I can take more legal action. But this bunch of jokers said, no, we have achieved industrial harmony with our bosses, to hell with the migrants. So we fought the case, and luckily the law in this case doesn't discriminate. It says whether you're a union member or whether you're not, you still have the benefit of the collective agreement. But the question is, why doesn't a parent owner like PNB play the role and look into this, the ethical companies that they invest in? So it's highly problematic. Wait, how many minutes? 30 seconds, my God. So I can go on for hours and hours, but these are the two types of corruption I mentioned. One is structural, and don't even start talking about trafficking. All our borders are compromised. I just rescued 2 Malaysians, so don't say I only have migrants, I also have Malaysians. So I rescued 2 Malaysians who were trafficked to the job scam victims, job scam trafficking in Cambodia and Myanmar. Both of them, one chap, he traveled to Cambodia without a passport. And you just think about it, by land, you have to pass Malaysian border, Thai border again, and then Cambodia. About 4 checkpoints you have to pass and no passport. I mean, I never heard that before in my life. I've heard, okay, you go with a passport, you don't get stamped or something. And the Malaysian to Myanmar, he traveled to Mawadi without a stamp in the passport. So once again, Malaysian border, Thai border, Myanmar border. So there's so much corruption in the whole cycle, and there's a lot of money to be made by all actors. I don't think we are any close to a solution. What I think could be done is, you have to reset the whole labour migration. And I thought Anwar doesn't compromise on this. If he does, Malaysian workers will continue to be at the lowest receiving end of labour benefits. Yeah, and of course, secondly, we should stop. I don't know what I wrote, but stop. Standardize all labor rights. So migrant, refugee, Malaysian, it has to be standard. You can't compromise on that. If you feel that migrants shouldn't receive the same standard as you, as a Malaysian, you're actually shooting your own self in your own foot. Yeah. So you should advocate for same rights. And last but not least, and this is a bit tough, and that's why I'm very happy the law faculty is here. Migrant workers in paper and in practice don't have genuine access to justice. YBGK ignores them, you don't have expertise who can handle trafficking cases. When they are detained, you have a 1 month, you have an additional period of detention just because you are a foreigner. The embassies are not informed in time, and before you know it, they don't have time, they don't have the space or the natural justice to defend themselves. For me, this is crazy. How has this been going on for the last 30, 40 years? What is the Bar Council saying about it? What are the law students saying about it? I'll be happy if one of the law students here can write a journal of that with me. It's ridiculous. There's no natural justice. And that's where every actor takes advantage. They know there's impunity for those who do injustice. So, with that mentioned, I will stop here. Thank you.